these are the people, or so to speak, the opposite of the uncommitted outside of hell, who don't get sort of committed to anything. The people in this level of hell are totally committed to something which is not going to give them a joyful life if they get committed to it. I mean, you can be committed to, say, smoking, and that with all your might, but that doesn't mean that you're going to have a good life. But so Dante's interested in these people because he admires them as committed, but he somewhat identifies with them in the kind of commitment they've got, but he also knows that it's got something wrong with it, and that's all going to turn out to be very interesting. And why I call them incontinent is, and why Virgil calls them incontinent, is that literally means incontinence. You've lost control. And these people have lost control of their lives. And this is a very good example of the kind of punishment that is the good kind, not the contrapasso where you did something and now something nasty is going to happen to you, but where what happens to you in hell is what happens already in your life, what you couldn't give up even if you wanted to, and what's revealed in hell is the dark side of it, and that's what you're stuck with for eternity. But I think I mentioned before, but if I didn't, I want to say it now. When Dante says that when these souls are ferried over to hell, I don't want to try to look it up right now, their fear turns to desire. Did I mention that? Oh, I wish I could open my book to it, but I don't want to spend the time. But anyway, what I take that to mean is that they both fear the consequences of this kind of commitment that they've got, but they wouldn't give it up. It's like telling somebody who's a smoker that if they go on smoking, they'll get emphysema, but the next hour or so, when they're ready to smoke, their fear of emphysema is trumped by their desire to smoke. So these people, even though they know the dark side, can't give up the desire. And now they turn out to be not smokers in Dante's time, but in the circle we're going to look at, the carnal, according to Ciardi, these are sex and love addicts. And some are just sex addicts. I don't think any of them are just love addicts. And then there are gluttons and people hooked on material things, and oddly, the angry. I spent a long time trying to figure out what it is that the angry love and desire. I mean, the love addicts love people, and the gluttons love food, and the materialists love things like BMWs. But what do the angry love? Well, all you can say is it's almost like a pun. Well, what they loved was getting angry. They loved hating people. That's the only way to understand their kind of addiction. There are people who just can't control the fact that they are always in a state of outrage, and those are the ones in the angry. Now, we're only going to talk about the ones in the circle of the lovers, because those are the most interesting to Dante, and their relation of their, I don't even want to call it crime, the relation of their addiction to their punishment is the most interesting. All these people love the wrong thing. Other people's bodies, food, material things, and getting angry. Those are all the wrong things. And what's wrong with them, that's where it begins to be interesting. It's not a kind of puritanical rejection of them. It's the only thing wrong with loving one person with all your might is that it is not fulfilling, and it has certain painful consequences. And the same for food, and the same for material things. These are all people who loved something too much, more than it could satisfy them. But one more thing, Beatrice. And you've got to resist this puritanical tendency. It's fun to have Ciardi in here just to see how sort of hopeless our culture has become. And a Catholic he is, too. I mean, it sounds like Puritan Protestantism to think that somehow loving bodies and sex too much is so terrible. In fact, you've got to realize that for Dante, it is the least serious sin there can be. Because up to now, all we've seen is the people that aren't really counted as sinners because Dante made up the category, namely the uncommitted, and then the people in limbo who aren't sinners because they couldn't help it, what they did, but they've got lives where they have no relation to Jesus or God. And now we've got the first of the sinners who, that is, knew about Christianity, were Christians, and loved something too much. But it's the sin for which Dante has the most sympathy. It's practically admiration he has for them, as you'll see. And that's because what they love is the most fulfilling thing, short of the fulfilling something that you could love. We haven't really talked about what that would be yet, but we won't for a while. But it's obviously, I mean, in some version or other, it's got to be what Jesus was telling the apostles to love each other and to love Him, and in some way which is different than what the lovers in this canto have to each other. The lovers in this canto are examples of romantic love. They are a kind of total commitment for another individual. Or, sort of mixed in with them, is also people who were just totally committed to sex and made phallic idols and so forth. This woman we'll hear about. But you have to sort of look up in the footnotes the various people who are in one of these stages of the Inferno to try to figure out what the unifying feature is. And I'm sort of reading into it my version of the unifying feature. Uncommitted addicts for sex and or romantic love. That covers them all, and only them. Now, Beatrice, what? Oh, great. Let's hear it.
Page 45, starting verse 121 on the bottom.
Yes. Okay. This is what I'm trying to explain. I want to get my pen so I can write it in. But what I'm trying to explain... No, don't have a pen. Will the pen for a second? Okay, what I want to explain is, what is it... I'm trying all of the time... You should be thinking all the time about what it means to say that as these souls approach the Inferno, which is full of all kinds of unpleasant things, to say the least, they nonetheless desire it. That's what I was trying to explain with my smoker example. To all pass over eagerly from here, divine justice transforms and spurs them so that their dread turns wish, they yearn for what they fear. That just continue. You can think of smokers and emphysema if you want. That's part of divine justice. It's just built into the way nature works, that if you love the kind of things that are in this first four stages, again, love beautiful bodies or food, and good food, I mean gourmet food even, and beautiful material things, and getting angry, this funny category, which, by the way, sort of fits Dante. He's angry about an awful lot of things by the end of the book. I mean, he's angry about politics, he's angry about popes, he puts the current pope in hell already and says there's only a kind of ghost of the pope actually on the throne. So he knows that anger is a big temptation. Okay, where are we now? So they're seeing what they find attractive in their life, now unglamorized and unattractive, but still irresistible. They haven't got any of the illusions anymore, and the rationalizations and the social support that covered up the downside, the way being a glutton looks like being a gourmet when you're eating in a nice restaurant with people you like and so forth. But that covers up the fact that if that's the most satisfying thing in your life, you're in trouble. And if I had a neighbor, that's what I'm talking about, he had a white BMW convertible, and every weekend he cleaned and polished and shined and washed this beautiful white convertible, and Dante would have felt sorry for him and said he'd be better off if he had gone to Chez Panisse, or even better off if he'd had a girlfriend. But there are all these levels of getting addicted to things that aren't really satisfying. So now what else here? Let's see. And the sins, of course, get worse as you go down. That's what I was just saying when I said you've got to realize that sort of structurally. That's how you know that the carnal ones, the romantic love one, is the least serious, because it's the top of this going down that funnel, which is the inferno. When you get to the bottom of the inferno, you get the worst sinner of all. Obviously, Satan is going to be down there. So now you see that. So things get worse and worse. And now we're going to look at the circle of the committed lovers, because Dante is so close to them. Because after all, they were influenced by the chivalric love stories. Paolo and Francesca, who are now the people we're going to talk about from now on, who were the big stars in what would be something like, it isn't People magazine. What do people read to find out what the latest stars are, who's involved with whom, and so forth? That was the big news in Florence anyway. Paolo and Francesca were lovers, and lo and behold, they were caught by her husband, and he killed them. And that was pretty sensational. And they became lovers from reading one of these chivalric stories about Lancelot, and so and Dante got his lady Beatrice. One of the things that saves Dante from a fate similar to this is that Beatrice is dead. So Dante isn't tempted to run off with her and commit adultery, or she run off with her husband. But his kind of addiction to Beatrice is very similar. And if it's different, we won't find out for a long time how it's different. And what is their punishment? Well, their punishment, now, what do you expect? It ought to be whatever the dark side, which they tend to overlook or just accept, of their way of life, of their character, of what the main thing is for them, is. And having read it, can you tell? I mean, Dante's very subtle. He doesn't just hit you over the head with what's wrong with that form of life. He sort of embodies it in the punishment. Do you remember what's happened? What's their problem when they're in this circle? What's their form of torture? Well, I'll explain it, but I mean, this is how you have to ask yourself as you go. But I'll give you a demonstration. Their problem is that they are swept around in a kind of constant storm. At the bottom of 58, this is now in Canto 5, line 27, I came to a place stripped bare of every light and roaring on the naked dark like seas racked by the war winds, their hellish flight, a storm and counter-storm through time foregone sweeps the soul of the damned, whirling and battering, it drives them on. So that means that he's taken up a kind of metaphor about passionate lovers. And it's that it can be like a storm. It can be very full of ups and downs and jealousies and fights and making up and so forth. It's definitely not a peaceful way of life. And he's dramatizing that passion is a storm.